Welcome back to all the girlies, gays, and days out there. It is now time for me to give you the best books that I read in 2024. Now, not all of these books came out in 2024. I just personally read them in 2024. Now, if you haven't watched my worst books I read in 2024 video, I highly recommend watching that. But today, we're going to be discussing the best books that I read in 2024. My top tier books. I did read over 100 books this year, and one of the books on my list snuck in there sneakily right at the very end of this year. And these are ranked, so let's start with number 10. And that book is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. I absolutely love this book. If you want to read a book about a sweeping generational tale about this family set in Korea during the time of the Japanese occupation of Korea, then this book is for you. The author really did decide to write a book where you get really attached to the characters in this family, but absolutely nothing good ever happens to this family. If you want to read a book where you will truly know no peace, then this is the book for you. Our main character that we are following, she becomes pregnant at a very young age, and she knows that her family will disown her or be upset with her about that, but she decides to keep her son, and her son is like the golden child. This is the one that's going to go off to university. This is the one that's going to bring all the money for the family. But we really watch this family struggle for years. This book first stars out in 1910, and every single person in this book has a really tragic backstory. From the mom to the sons to the grandfathers, the dads, literally everyone has a horrible, sad backstory, but you cannot help but root for them. When a person would succeed in this family, I felt like I had just succeeded, and when someone would fail or go through a rough time, I felt like I was going through a rough time. Even though this is a book that is based in Japan about a Korean family, I do feel like people could find something to relate about in this book. Even though I'm just a basic Hispanic woman and I have no connection to Japan or Korea, I still felt like I could relate, because this book really tells you how a certain set of people were not treated well by time, and in that sense I could relate because of the most recent election where a certain group of people do not treat Hispanic people well. That's beside the point. I just highly recommend this book. I don't read a lot of lit fic or historical fiction anymore, but I would recommend this one if you truly want to feel all the feels and, like I said, never know any kind of peace. And then coming in at number 9 is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. I'm not sure if Kate Goldbeck has released any more books this year or plans to release any more next year, but I will be keeping a watch on what she writes from now on, because You Again is a romance novels, and I realize I read a lot of romance books, but this one is where the two main characters feel like real people. This story is set in New York. I do remember the girl's name. Her name is Ari, and she's a comedian, and the guy, I don't remember his name, but he is a chef, and these are two people that keep accidentally meeting over time, and as they keep accidentally meeting over time, they develop a friendship which then blossoms into a romance. This book is one that I feel like actually took the time to let you get to know the characters. I thought this was very funny. I thought that the romance felt really real and felt really raw. You really feel for these characters, and this is one of the books that I read at the very beginning or the middle of the year. I think in April or May. I could be completely wrong, but I could not get this off my mind. I just loved it so much. And then coming at number 8 is a book that snuck in there last minute, and this is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare is an author that I've always heard about but never thought to pick up, because the cover of her books are giving $2 at Walmart. It's giving, I didn't really try that hard on the cover, but the content of the book is where it really matters, because we are following, I think her name is Emma, and then the Duke, his name is Ash, and Emma shows up on the Duke's doorstep wearing a wedding dress, being like, hey sir, I made this wedding dress for your bride and she never paid me, so you need to pay me. And Ash is someone who is in desperate need of a wife or a bride because he needs to have an heir, but he's under the belief that no one could ever love him because he is disfigured coming out of the war, having burns and having the whole side of his body be burnt away and scarred. And so he looks at Emma in this wedding dress and he's like, you actually will do. And Emma agrees to marry him because she has a friend who is pregnant, and back in the ye old Regency times, a woman becoming pregnant without being married is scandalous. So she wants to help her friend and set her friend up at one of her cottage summer houses so her friend could give birth to this baby out there, and no one in polite society will ever be the wiser. But I really love this book because I think Tessa Dare just does romance so well, especially a Regency type romance where so many things get written wrong because of the way that men treat women back then. But I believe that Emma was just a really strong female character, and Ash was just a really understanding man, and he just really, really loved her. And this book is one that I would never have ever picked up without being a part of Sarah Without an H's Patreon, where we did a Secret Santa book recommendation. This is just a romance that snuck up on me, and this book is an example of what the Bridgerton series or the books could be, because the Bridgerton books are really problematic. The TV show did plus or fix some things that were wrong with the book, but I would love to see the Duchess Deal and just the Girl Meets Duke series adapted, because I think it would just be done so well. And then number 7 on this list is an oldie but a goodie, and that is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Now, this is a book that I read back when it was first released, and I think when I initially read it, I gave it 3 stars, but upon rereading, it was a 5 stars. We are following Victor and Eli, and they meet as college students, and Eli has this theory about how you can develop extraordinary powers, kind of like superheroes, and then he goes and he does that, and Victor's like, I actually want to be a superhero too, so he then goes and get his powers, but Eli becomes jealous because he's like, I'm the only one that's meant to have these powers. And throughout this book, they are at each other's throats. They also do meet a pair of sisters who have some extraordinary powers as well. If you want to read a book that's kind of like The Boys but with more depth and nuance, then this is the book for you. This book has truly stood the test of time. And I have read Ventral, which is a sequel to this one. I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. And apparently there's supposed to be a 3rd book in this series that V.E. Schwab announced like over 5 years ago but hasn't released. Miss V.E. Schwab, I actually need you to get on it. I need the 3rd book in this series. Like, can we wrap it up? I need to know what have happened. And then the 6th book on this list is another oldie but a goodie, which is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This was such a gamble for me because I did a video early in this year where I gave YA a second chance, and I was so stunned by the 1st book in the series, which is The Cruel Prince. It's back there on my shelf somewhere. But then I read this book and it had me gooped. It had me gagged. The plot twist at the end had me tripping over myself, because in this book we are following 3 sisters, but we're mostly following Jude, and she's the kind of girl, she's like chaotic, she's crazy, but they live in the land of fairy. They were stolen away as children to the land of fairy because one of their sisters, don't remember what her name is actually half fairy, but Jude and Jude's twin sister are full humans, and as they're in the land of fairies, they realize that the fairy people do not treat the humans all that well because they think that humans are very simple creatures, they don't have powers, and Jude's like, I actually want to stay in the land of fairy, but I have goals, aspirations bigger than myself. And I can't really get into this book too much because this is the 2nd book in a series, but I just want you to know that this had me hooked from page 1. I do have a special edition copy of The Cruel Prince, and then there was another special edition copy. Don't believe it was this book. It was a different book in the series that I bought, but I just love this series so much. It's so fast paced. I read it in like a day, and that's usually a good sign for me that I love a book. It is YA, but honestly, I suggest you give it a chance if you haven't already, because this book has been out for quite a while. And then number 5 on this list is Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands. I just love this series. I actually did read the 1st book, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, in like January or maybe February, and then I followed up by reading this book. So we are following Emily, who is a dryologist, so she studies fairies, and then we're following Wendell Bambleby. I don't know if we're saying his name correctly, but he is a colleague of hers. At the beginning of the book, they are kind of like collegiate enemies or academic rivals, but Wendell is in love with Emily, and Emily can sometimes be a bit of an unlikable character, but I do love that about her, and I do like the romance that they have together. The romance plays a little bit of a minor part. This is more about their journey through the world of fairy and learning about fairies. This book can perfectly be described as a cross between Veronica Speedwell and the Half a Soul series, because if you want an unlikable female character that you still root for, and if you want a good romance / fairy story, then this book is for you. The 3rd book and the final book in the series, which I think is called Emily Wilde's Compendium of something, is going to come out next year, and I'm so excited to read that book. I just feel like there could be like 10 books in the series, but unfortunately it is just a trilogy, but I am excited to read the last book in the series. And then the 4th book should come to absolutely no surprise to anybody, and that is Stolen by the Wolves by Lex Robertson. This is such a happy surprise for me because I had zero intentions of reading this book. This book I read for Riley Marie's Patreon book club pick, and I don't always read the book club picks. They just need to speak to me in order for me to pick them up, and this wasn't speaking to me when it was announced as the book club pick, but I was just desperate to like read anything, and the Kindle version of this book was like $2 that I figured, why not, let's just pick it up. And it's short, by the way. It's really short. I decided, why not, let's just pick it up, let's give it a chance, let's see what this book is about, and I fell head over heels. This is a Viking Omegaverse. So we are following Thrain. He's the guy, he is a Viking, and Tamsin, the girl, she's like a princess or royalty. And Tamsin is being married off to another bit of royalty, but we find out that bit of royalty that Tamsin is being married off to is actually being secretly ruled or taken over by the Vikings, and the Vikings have a bigger plan to go to Tamsin's land, or where she's originally from, to steal her away or to get these mystical type of woman. But this is a romance Omegaverse story, and if you haven't read Omegaverse before, I highly recommend that you look up what that word is. I just love the yearning, the romance that is built in this book between Thrain and Tamsin, and then it has just perfectly blended in the fantasy aspect of it. If this was just a romance book, I probably wouldn't like it, but the way that the fantasy is mixed in and weaved in there so well, you could definitely tell the author did her work when writing this book. And I actually own all 3 of the books, the ones that are released, and a special edition copy of this book, because I just loved it so much. And then the 3rd book on this list is actually an entire series that I read this year, but out of that entire series, there was one book in that series that stood out in particular, and that would be A Dangerous Collaboration by Deanna Raybourn. And this is the 4th book in the Veronica Speedwell series. I realized while making my list this year of the best books I read in 2024 that I actually read all 9 books in the Veronica Speedwell series this year. The first book in the series, which is A Curious Beginning, was actually a reread because I read that last year in 2023 in November. But this series is following Veronica Speedwell, and she is a lepidopterist, which is a butterfly scientist. And then we're following Stoker, who is a jack of all trades kind of guy, as they go through and solving some mysteries or some murders. But the 4th book in the series actually had me gripped because, as you may know, that this is a mystery romance. So we're following the romance between Veronica and Stoker, and it is a slow burn. And when I say slow burn, I truly mean slow as fuck. But this book is where everything comes to a head and their romance truly develops, and there is no way to describe it other than being absolutely perfect. I am so sad that this series is over. Deanna Raybourn was contracted to only write like 9 books, and she did that. And I just want to tell her publisher, like, actually get on it. Write her a new contract, because I want like 10 more books in the series. Like, what is going on? I know I didn't say much about this book, but I feel like I literally can't because this is the 4th book in a series. But honestly, pick up this entire series. You will not regret it. Now, the 2nd book on this list is actually written by an author who also ended up on my worst books of 2024 list. But this book that she wrote, I love so much, and that would be Funny Story by Miss Emily Henry. Yes, Happy Place did end up on my worst books that I read in 2024, but Funny Story, she is that girl. She is a good book. So we're following Daphne and Peter, and they are engaged to be married, and then we have Petra and Miles, and they are boyfriend girlfriend. At the very beginning of this book, Petra confesses her feelings to Peter because they have been friends for a very, very long time, and Petra's like, actually, I think I love you and we should give it a shot and we should become a couple and you should actually end your engagement to Daphne. And they go ahead and do that, and Daphne is devastated and Miles get broken up with, and he is devastated. And because Daphne and Peter live together, Peter's like, you need to move out because Petra needs to move in, so you need to go. You actually need to find a place to live. And Daphne's like, where am I gonna go last minute? And Miles offers her a place to stay at his apartment, and then one day they get in the mail an invite to Peter and Petra's wedding, and Daphne kind of goes off the handle a little bit, and she calls up Peter and she's like, yeah, I'll go to your wedding, but I'm gonna bring my boyfriend Miles. And Peter's like, Miles? What? So Daphne and Miles start to fake date, and I absolutely love the fake dating trope, but throughout the book they do end up falling in love. And one of my favorite things about this book is that Daphne is that girl that's always in a relationship. She always has a boyfriend, and she really starts to discover herself in this book, and she's like, who am I without a boyfriend? Like, who am I? What do I like to do? And she really learns to do that like on her own. But I just really love the relationship with Daphne and Miles, and Miss Emily Henry just has a way of writing romance so well and developing characters that feel like real people. I love everything about this book. This book is over 400 pages long, but it didn't feel like that when I was reading it. This is one of the Emily Henry books that I would absolutely recommend, except Happy Place. Like, fuck Happy Place. I don't know what the hell was going on with when she wrote Happy Place, but this is the better book. This is the book that I recommend to anybody. And then the number 1 book on this list, I'm actually cheating kind of a little bit because it is a series, and all 3 of the books in the series I read this year, and that would be the Mistborn series by Mr. Brandon Sanderson. The Final Empire is a book that I read, I want to say back in 2016, 2017. And when I read it, I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it, but I was intimidated by how long these books were. So I just never picked up the second book, The Well of Ascension, until this year. And when I picked up The Well of Ascension and I read it, it had me shook as shit. It had me gooped gag. There were so many plot twists in that book that I did not see coming. I mean, I did predict one, but the other one I was like, what? I could not believe that that happened. And then I read A Hero of Ages recently, and that one had me emotionally distraught. Was it too much to ask Mr. Brandon Sanderson to write an ending to the series where everyone is happy? Probably. This series is another book series that will never give you peace. You will not know a moment of happiness. We are following our main character, Vanna. She's kind of like a street urchin, and she is what's called a Mistborn, so she's able to use all 8 elementic powers. And in the first book, she meets Kel, who recruits her to take over the Lord Ruler, and then from there, everything kind of kicks off. If you want to read a book that has deep world building, a little bit too deep that sometimes it's a bit confusing, but I kind of got over it while I was reading this book, then this book is for you. If you want to read an absolutely devastating story about characters that you will fall in love with, but then they, then this is the book for you. I've actually started the part 2 of this series, which is an Alloy of Law. I have it up there on my bookshelf. But after reading this first trilogy here, I want to continue reading Brandon Sanderson's book. I'm going to make it a goal for myself next year to read The Way of Kings. That series, I don't know what it's called. That series is very long, so it'll probably take me some time. But Mr. Brandon Sanderson has cemented himself as one of my all-time favorite writers. And I'm so excited that I finally have read this series. I highly recommend it. This series comes close to making me feel the way I felt when I watched Arcane for the first time. And if you love Arcane, I feel like you would love this series. Anyway, those are my top 10 books of 2024. If you have read any of the books on this list, please let me know what you think about them down below in the comments. Also, please remember to subscribe, give it a like, comment below, and I will see you in another video next week. Bye!